You got to remember, humor and laughter can heal fear. Whew. Do you dare? Sometimes it releases the tension, but certainly there's going to be tension, fear, and anxiety as Pluto builds up. So when Pluto conjunct on my first hit, I get the conjunction to my sun in 81. So 81, 46, 66, 76. So I'm 35. At 35, I have Pluto conjunct my sun. In 2 months, I have Pluto square my sun. It's just coming up in the next year or so now that I'm 72. So I have this just ahead of me. Oh my goodness. Okay. But in 81, I had built the harp. I really wasn't playing it, but I had built it and I had been working on tuning systems on it. And a TV show, That's Life, came and did 2 shows, one on astrology. And then they saw the harp. They had to do one on the harp. And I was afraid of doing it, but I said, okay, we'll do it. So I did one on the harp. That was really the beginning of getting the harp out there and having to promote it. At the same time, so just as I did the recording and marriage number 3 started on this Pluto square to itself, here I did the performance with the harp and was showing it. And then I got married shortly thereafter with my marriage number 2. And at the same time, I was writing my predictions I was putting out, but I was forced to syndicate them so that they would be controlled and go out to numerous news outlets rather than just one. So these are all similarly, it was confronting my purpose, my power, my goals, what I think is important in my life. So I had worked on a creative thing with the harp. I'm a Libra. I didn't want to be alone. The marriage came up. Well, let's get married. And probably I forced it. And probably we would have been better living together. But anyways, it happened like that. And I probably forced it with the Pluto. And eventually it didn't last that long, but just as long as it needed to. The predictions, I just was going through my history book and pulling out the things I had in there. But the big thing was on the last hit of this. About 5 years before this, I had a bookstore and the bookstore went under and I survived it, but I had built up the astrology library. It wasn't that big then. It might have been about 5,000 books, or maybe it's more like 10,000 books. But I was having trouble when the store went under. I had to let go of the library. So I gave it to a spiritual group that were going to start a spiritual university. And they could use the library as the credibility inside the university. So I set that up and I let go of the library. I put a little clause in it that in 5 years I would come and check it out. If it was going well, it's fine. If it wasn't going well, I have the option to take it back. Okay, so that was in the agreement. So in 1982, when I went and I called them up, the university never happened. The spiritual group kept going, but it never actually got the money, and the corporate thing never really built up. They had the corporation, never held. They couldn't run it properly. So the spiritual university never happened, and the library had been delegated to someone's basement. And I had all these nice wood bookshelves that were 8-foot bookshelves, and all the bookshelves were cut, the whole top 2 feet were cut off. The books were scrambled up. They were all in order. They were put out of order. They let people come and take books and go. And like 1,000 books or more of the best books were taken out of the library and were gone. I went and saw this. I was so horrified. I was so angry. I was furious. How could someone do that? All this knowledge, all this information, how could they possibly do? I was furious. And in that moment, I'm taking this library back. I'm not leaving here for another second. I'll be here tomorrow with a truck. So I just made this decision. I went and got a big van, or big truck, bigger than a van. Went and got the library and the shelves, put it back, and I was living in a studio with my wife. But I didn't ask my wife I was bringing it back or anything. I had to tell her that night as I'm fuming. So I had to clean up the space in my place, the whole living room. What was the whole living room space, the living music space. I had to pull it aside, and I had to build up all these shelves and build up a library space. So where we had a whole house type thing, and suddenly it was a library that had little places that we lived in. So it was really confronting to the marriage. So this was a Pluto on my sun. Eventually, that point was the beginning. It may have taken a few years, but that was the beginning of the end of the marriage. Just started, and within a year, boom, this happened. And suddenly I wasn't just married, I was married to the library as much, probably more than my wife looking back, but at the time I didn't think so. So this was my Pluto to my sun. Now, 3/4 of people won't get Pluto conjunct their sun in their lifetime. They'll get a square, they'll get an opposition. It'll be more challenging, running into more upset. This was a breakthrough for me. I have a strong Pluto. I have serious, difficult aspects with it, but it forced me to have to survive and get some things done. So on these little squares, when Pluto's conjunct your sun, you have a confrontation. It's power and importance. Who's in control? And yeah, are you ready for it? Do you dare or don't you? That's the conjunction. At the squares, you have confrontations. You're auditing your truth. There's blocks, and you're being forced to make adjustments. At the opposition, you're being confronted by power and importance, and often your power and your confidence is being blocked by some bigger reality, or it's a bigger demon, depending what you call it. Like, or you can't put up with something anymore. You have to face that. And things can escalate to a fearful and confronting extreme whenever Pluto's there. So in a kid, it's often an abusive thing. In an adult, it can be abusive things in relationships. Pluto can bring these difficult things. This is just your sun, so it's about your confidence. So these were challenging things, getting out of the shadow with the harp and having to show it to people. When I didn't think I could play it well enough, I had to show it. Getting married a second time after the first one took some fear and confidence, and taking the library back. All of these things brought issues that forced my goal, my confidence and my goals, my purpose. I had to fight for it. It wasn't easy. But on the square, it's almost the same thing. It's hardly distinguishable between the conjunctions, squares, and oppositions. But the squares and oppositions, the same things could happen, but often they're a little bit more stress-oriented. It's a little more difficult to get personal control. You still have to get control. You still have to be truthful. But often a little more adverse things will come up. Okay, this is the only way to learn. By the time you've done 10 people's charts and you looked at, if you've got 5 or 10 people's charts and you've gone through each of these aspects and you watch them, you start to say, oh, it's like that. Oh, that happened to them. You'll start to grow into this and you'll start to see it and you'll get a sense of it. By the time you've done 50 charts or 100 charts, these other planets become more familiar. By the time you've done 1,000 or so, you can almost smell them. So Pluto to itself, Pluto to the sun. We'll take the angles next. Let's see. Now Pluto to the angles, it's not like when Pluto hits a planet, it's hitting a function. It's not hitting the, when it hits the angle, it's not hitting a function. It's a sensitive point, and it's these are very powerful things. So let me just get the experiences to back it up. Okay, so Pluto's only going to touch 1 or 2 angles in your lifetime. There you go. Okay, so, but my Pluto is in the 12th house. So it hits my ascendant early, and then it comes up and hits my IC. It'll never get over to my descendant in my lifetime. So all the time, my confrontations in my life, they start off being social. Like when my mother, my grandmother, my grandfather, her brother all died, my parents split up. This is all stuff around me, 12th house stuff around me as I was growing up. But from the ascendant on, it was me having to deal with myself and my brother and having to get by. And there were it was subjective fears. It was below the horizon. So Pluto's probably going to be all subjective all your life, or all objective, or all rising, or all reacting, all setting. Or it may, when it crosses one of the angles, it's changing from rising to setting, or from objective to subjective. The fears are changing from out in the world to inside yourself. That's how it happened for me. But if it's below and it goes above, the fears will come from inside to outside. Or if it's going from the setting side, where you're reacting to fears, as it's said on the setting side, on the rising side, you'd be instigating the fears. So as it gets to your midheaven, there's a confrontation of power. Instead of reacting to fears, you're having to confront or instigate fears. It's happening on the other side. So these shifts, when it hits angle, it changes huge phases in your life and represents a whole new level of psychological complex, and where the fears and the anxieties and the problems are that stretch over 40 years of your life. Of course, some people might have 120 degrees from their ascendant to their IC. And Pluto might be in that one quadrant all their life. But someone may have 60 degrees, and they may go from one quadrant to the, like mine's just in the 12th, it goes to the ascendant, and I go through the objective to the subjective, and from the rising to the setting. So I go through 3 quadrants, I touch 3 quadrants with Pluto, and my fears and confrontations go in those areas, my anxieties go in those areas. Now, if you have a right relationship to Pluto, you have the anxiety that's telling you, I got to really work at this. I got to really have to work at this. So I have Pluto conjunct Saturn. So whenever authority comes, it's always severe on me and harsh. So I work really hard to be in control so that other people don't tell me what I have to do. Like, anyways, this is how it works for me. But but when it hits your ascendant, you're going to have a confrontation of your identity. You're going to have identified your anxieties were out in the world, thinking there's these fears, these things going on out in the world, these confrontations, and it catches up to my identity, and suddenly it's not about the world. I didn't deal with this, or I had to walk away from this, and the problems go inside yourself. They become subjective for the rest of your life. And there's a confrontation, while that's going on, there's a confrontation over your identity, there's fears of your image, there's personal anxiety, a lot of personal breakdowns or anxiety complexes will come up then. Now, if you don't believe in God and Pluto hits your ascendant, it's more likely going to be like a breakdown and you're going through really massive therapy to reorient your sense of reality. You may have to do that even if you believe in God, but at the same time, if you're believing in God or something spiritual, you may see this was a test to make me more transcendent, to go deeper within. It can, again, that depends what age you are, what maturity you are, how it's happening, when it happens. But it's not like nothing's happening. These are significant happenings. But you don't really have much to compare it to, except when it comes up, I go, oh, geez, I got to deal with this. The auditor's at the door. The reality check is coming in. The test, the challenge is being there. The confrontation is on your doorstep. How do you deal with it? Do you fold or not? I knew one lady. She ran a big bookstore, a very successful metaphysical bookstore in Toronto. And she didn't like her looks, so she had a face job or a nose job or something to fix her face. I think she had a facelift and she had a nose job. And it didn't take that well. She was never satisfied, so she had it again and then tried it again. And finally, she'd had a few surgeries and she couldn't fix it. She wasn't happy with what it was and couldn't fix it. And by the time Pluto would come down and hit her ascendant, she did herself in. She was not prepared. She was afraid of living for herself. She was hiding away. She was not letting anyone see her or whatever. This is a very successful, rich person. And it hit on a personal level, and she just couldn't, she'd rather die than be seen as not looking properly. Now, that's fairly superficial, but it's not to her. It was her reality check. Okay, so I don't have the charts for these, or I'm not going to pull them out anyways, but I'm just making associations I make to things that are equivalent to it. Something hits the IC, Pluto hits your IC, that's your deepest innermost point. That's fears around home, facing conflicts about the past, homes, if there was abuse, if there's power struggles, where am I living? Am I not living anywhere? What's going on? It's hitting this deep core to mom, to family, to your home, to your sense of security. Deep subjective fears. And having to face them and confront them. Now, whenever these fears come up, it really is a catalyst that if it uses it, it pushes you to take a spiritual path or get truthful and be more transcendent. It really is using Pluto in a positive way. But it doesn't make sense until the fears come there. It doesn't make sense to be transcendent to them. Or it might make sense, but it hasn't really been tested. And it comes up. When Pluto hits the descendant, this is the setting half of your chart, but Pluto's moving up to it. It's going to be confrontations around relationships. A fear of losing or fear of staying with a difficult, powerful, over-powerful, or over-controlling relationship. Because Pluto goes outside of Saturn, it's harshness above and beyond seemingly the law. So if there's injustice, it's going to be extreme. And there'll be fears associated to it. So if you're in a difficult relationship and it's building up to that, you know there's going to have to be some consulting, some talking. You're going to have to deal with it. And if you're afraid of dealing with it, you know the fears will get worse if you don't deal with it.